everyone, and welcome again to another edition of the Philly Factor. I'm your host, Paul Perrello. Well, I can't believe that it's been 20 years, but in March of 2004, March 21st to be exact, 2004, the landscape of Philadelphia sports history changed dramatically with the implosion of Veterans Stadium. I remember it well, having been there, witnessing the stadium being leveled to a pile of dirt and concrete and rumble and wire and barbed wire and all that stuff. But for me, it was more than that. It was a full circle moment for me because I, as a kid, attending Stella Maris grade school at 10th and Bigler, saw the stadium go from a vacant lot, which was one time a municipal dump down there at Broad and Patterson. I saw that lot be transformed into Veterans Stadium. On March of 21st of 2004, Veterans Stadium disappeared from the landscape of Philadelphia sports stadiums and arenas. And the man who was responsible for bringing down the house of the Phillies and the Eagles in numerous concerts is Nick Petros. And Nick joins us on this edition of the Philly Factor. And Nick, first of all, thank you so much for joining us here on the program. And how does it feel to be referred to as the man that brought down Veterans Stadium?
It feels pretty good being a sports fan and being from Philadelphia region. It's quite an honor. I was very fortunate to be that guy, so I wear the badge proudly.
The thing that struck me, and there was an article in the Philadelphia Inquirer, numerous articles over the past few weeks marking the 20th anniversary of the demolition. But we sports fans, we residents of South Philadelphia, the city of Philadelphia, and perhaps anybody that ever stepped foot inside of the vet or didn't step foot inside of the vet, we thought that the person or persons responsible for setting off the detonation device, those people included Mayor John Street, Greg Luzinski, and the Philly Fanatic. But we have since learned that their pushing of the button was basically a ceremonial push of the button, and you were really the person with their finger on the trigger, if you will.
Yeah, as much as I wish that we had one of the plungers, like the old Wile E. Coyote cartoons. That was a ceremonial plunger, and they were listening in over the radio to the countdown that the that the actual blasters were reading over the radio so that they could match the actions. But the actual detonator is not as exciting as you would think. It's a pretty simple device. It's a yellow box about the size of a regular shoe box with two buttons and a little light indicator on it. And so.
Well, I want to sort of get into the reason, I guess, for a ceremonial purpose that they put Mayor Street and Luzinski and the Fanatic there on a platform on Broad Street to do the ceremonial plunge. But did anybody know, perhaps besides you and the construction company, the contractors working on the project, did anybody know that what they were pushing was not the real button?
Oh yeah. We, as a matter of fact, we were the ones that had that plunger built for the Phillies. This was a scheduled event. We had planned the event, the VIP tent, the viewing area, the after party. Everything was prearranged with the Phillies. So yeah, the folks that were standing on the stage up there, they knew that it was ceremonial.
We should mention involved in the demolition of Veterans Stadium, and literally myself, having grown up in that area, and then in the final days of the vet, literally looking out my front door, and there was the vet. And I remember that Sunday morning vividly because we, the residents of what they called VSN, or the Stadium Sports Special Services District, we had two options. We could either stay in the house and not come out until the old Claire was sounded, or we were to go to 10th and Packer for a special VIP viewing area. But I remember we had to move our cars. We had to get them out of the neighborhood. And going out was very early in the morning when we had to leave our homes. And having witnessed the implosion and then going back afterwards, it was a very stark, eerie feeling that that building that was at the end of the block was no longer there. So I know there were a number of construction companies, a number of contractors that were involved. And so what we should give proper credit to the company that you worked for and was responsible in part for bringing down Veteran Stadium.
So, Paul, I worked for LF Driscoll at the time. They were joint ventured with Hunt Construction. They were the construction managers responsible for the construction of the new stadium, the ballpark, Citizens Bank Park, as well as the demolition of Veteran Stadium. We hired Brandenburg out of Chicago. They were the demolition subcontractor. They were responsible for the demolition and implosion of the vet, and in turn, they hired a gentleman named Steve Pettigrew. He was the blaster of license, and he was the gentleman that actually had the license and permit to do the blasting here in Philadelphia.
I just recounted what it was that morning for us to leave our homes and to go to the VIP area to actually witness the vet being imploded. But what was it like for you, being a Phillies fan, being an Eagles fan, having been at the stadium numerous times, not only as a contractor working on this project, but even as a fan prior to that? But what was it like when you actually pushed the button that set the sequence in motion to bring down Veterans Stadium?
Well, I was nervous. Admittedly, I knew that the entire city of Philadelphia, pretty much every person that I knew was watching. So we knew that it had to go right. It was a surreal experience, being a kid that grew up going to the vet and see the Phillies play and the Eagles, and I don't know how many concerts I attended at the vet. So it was definitely surreal and a lot of fun, quite honestly, to be involved with that project. It was a lot of hard work, but it was very exciting. I really enjoyed it.
You didn't get the assignment or were told that you were going to be the person responsible for pushing the button until early that morning, if not at the very last minute. I mean, you're on the scene with all of your colleagues because you want to witness the fruits of your labor there. But how did that all come about? How did they say, "Hey, Nick, tag, you're it"? How did it come about that you were going to be the person that was going to push the button?
No, you're right. You're absolutely correct. I did not know that I was going to be the person to push the button until about a half hour before the actual implosion. I received a call over the radio from Pettigrew's crew, and they basically said, "Petros, you better get over here to the blasting station if you're going to push this button." So I looked over at my brother Mark, who was shadowing me that day. My big brother was hanging out, so we looked at each other, and he said, "You better get your ass over there." So we were scooted over very quickly, and the film crew was there from the History Channel. There was a bunch of other people, some of which I had not met before. They were guests of either Brandenburg or Steve Pettigrew, and they basically said, "Look, this gentleman here is going to push the charge button, and you're going to, as soon as that lights up and we tell you to go, you're going to press and you're going to hold that fire button until you hear some really loud noises." And yeah, I was shocked. I know for a fact, I found out afterwards that there was a long list of people who had requested that honor to push that button, including David Montgomery and the mayor himself. I had no idea. I found that out afterwards from one of the Phillies reps had told me that. So yeah, I was very surprised, shocked, and pleased at the same time.
When an anniversary, like we just celebrated the 20th anniversary of the implosion, I mean, with every passing year and having sat at many of the community meetings there where they discussed what was going to happen and how it was going to happen, and it was not nonchalant on the part of the contractors or the city or all those people that were involved. I mean, everybody really was concerned about the greater sports stadium complex area. But when an anniversary like 20 years and then 5 years will be 25th, I mean, does the memory of that day, I guess, dissipate? I mean, it's like, for me, where were you on the day that JFK was shot? And of course, going back to my youth and the same school, Stella Maris, first grade, I remember it was like yesterday. But like for you, every year that every anniversary that passes, does the memory of that does it wane a little bit, or is it still fresh in your mind?
Well, it was pretty exciting. Obviously, right after it happened, and for probably the first 5 years, it was definitely a more exciting memory. Not that it's not exciting at this point, but 20 years have gone by now, and um, a lot of water has passed under the bridge at this point in my life. So yeah, while it's a great memory, I try not to make too much of a deal about it anymore.
In all of the other projects that you have worked on, I suspect nothing has come close to this experience, not only as a contractor working on the scene there, but the scope of the project. I mean, it was Veterans Stadium, and as we said before, it was the home of the Phillies and the Eagles and numerous concerts. But has anything else that you've done since then, probably maybe even before that, does it even come close in your mindset?
No, to me, the Citizens Bank Park Veteran Stadium project will always be my favorite, even if it's not the largest. I've worked on other projects that were larger as far as a dollar volume is concerned, but as it relates to the scope and size of the project, I mean, you're talking about a ballpark and a stadium on a couple hundred acres in the middle of Philadelphia, with every single eyeball in the city watching every step we make. So I don't think anything will ever surpass that experience.
Let's talk a little bit about the pressure of making sure on the morning of March 23rd, 21st, 2004. I mean, the pressure not only on you, but on everybody involved in this project, that when that button is pushed, that everything that's supposed to happen happens. Because we've seen other projects where there have been implosions and either half the building comes down and the other half remains, and then there have been projects where they push the button and nothing happens. So recount for us what the pressure. I mean, the pressure was on you to push that button, but I guess everybody had to be on pins and needles that morning to make sure that this all came off without a problem.
No, you're right. The city of Philadelphia was fresh off the memory of the Sugar House, the Jack Frost implosion. I don't know if you remember that, where the Sugar House Casino is now. The demolition
Sure.
contractor, the implosion contractor, I think they got it halfway to the ground, and then it ended up taking another year for them to safely demolish it, and that was just not an option. The city of Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Phillies, all of the invested partners, made it very clear that was not acceptable. So I know that the engineers spent a lot of time designing and figuring out all of the timing for the explosions. Yeah, there was a test shot done early on, which you may have seen in the History Channel special, where they loaded one column with a known amount of explosives to see how strong or how weak the concrete was, so that they could exactly fine tune how much they were going to include in each location. And that is critical. If you don't use enough, the building won't fall properly, and if you use too much, you could potentially cause damage, or worse, hurt somebody, and you don't want any of that. That was also just as important to our clients and to the Phillies, that nobody got hurt, and that there was no property damage.
When the smoke cleared. It took a while. Actually, how long was the actual detonation? I mean, let's get that out there. I mean, for us that sat there and watched, I mean, we just were flooded with emotion seeing the vet come down. But what was the actual um, time of the from start to finish before? It's hard to say, before the dust settled. But how long did it actually take?
So I'm glad you asked that question. It took 62 seconds, which is actually a world record for the longest implosion of a single structure. Unfortunately, Guinness does not have a category for that, and I don't think that there was any big interest to create a category. But it was a very long implosion. Typically, implosions do not take place like that, and that was strategic, uh, and had a lot to do with making sure that your home and your neighbors' homes were safe and would not be subjected to any due vibrations.
When the dust finally settled, there was a I've never seen anything like it. Perhaps I'll never see anything like it again, but there was a rush of people that were on the scene, and the area was pretty well protected. I mean, it wasn't like a free for all, but there was a rush by the people that were on Broad Street, on Patterson, on Packer, to grab mementos, namely pieces of concrete that were brought to the ground. And I read some accounts of who would want a piece of concrete that came from wherever, but everybody wanted a piece of a veteran stadium. Did you, the contractors working, was that in your mindset that there would be such a I also heard there was a side hustle going on as well with some of the people working the site, that they were selling pieces of concrete to people, fans that were there on Broad Street. But did that ever entertain anybody's mind that, hey, once this is down, there's going to be a mad rush for artifacts?
No, no, we didn't expect that there would be so many people that would be clamoring for a piece of concrete from the vet. Obviously, we knew that the stadium held a lot of held a good place in a lot of people's hearts, and that they would want mementos. But we just assumed that they would want things like chairs and astroturf and things that had an identifying mark on it that said it came from the vet. But I am glad that we had a full 8 foot tall chain link fence around the entire site. There was a corner at Broad and Pattison where they had the old iron gate. It got so bad with people trying to sneak on site that we just had the contractor put a bulldozer full of crushed concrete and just right up against the fence so that people could reach in and take a piece of the vet, and not endanger themselves by trying to sneak onto our job site. It was pretty nuts. We caught a lot of people, climbing the fence, especially on the weekends. And, we had security there 24/7, of course. But people wanted a piece of the vet, and yes, I'm sure there were plenty of side hustles going on behind the scenes.
I mean, this was a pretty historic building in Philadelphia, and just on a personal note, having worked on that project and having gone as a fan to the vet. I mean, did you manage to get a piece of concrete?
Yeah, I managed to get my hands on a couple pieces of memorabilia. I actually still have some concrete left over. Yeah, we made sure that our friends and families had something to remember the vet by, and there was certainly plenty to go around. I think the Phillies left something like 40,000 seats for us to dispose of. So if somebody said, "Hey Nick, can you hook me up with a couple of vet seats?" I was basically, "How many do you want?" So
what happened then to the detonation box? I mean, is that I would think that's you talk about the seats from the vet, but this would also be another historic artifact. I mean, or did that just get reused in another project or other projects down the line?
that's a good question. My guess is that the Phillies probably still have that somewhere in their warehouse full of goodies. I actually tried to purchase the Liberty Bell sign through the formal auction that the Phillies had, but ultimately they decided that they were going to hold on to it and perhaps open up a museum someday. So hopefully that detonation box is tucked away safely somewhere for future display.
Before our interview, I did mention that, and this is one of those things that my wife says, why are you holding on to that stuff? And as I told you, I did have it, and I have it here. It is the lanyard that we had to wear in order to gain entrance into the special VIP area right there at the corner of 10th and Packer. But I knew I had it. Yeah, like she says, what are you holding on to that for? And I'm holding on to it for things just like this. You never
Mm-hmm.
know when you're going to need it, or what. For me, this is, as I said, I explained to you and said earlier, this was a full circle moment, and so is this. I mean, I still recall the pile drivers putting the steel beams into the ground there, and it was nonstop sitting in Stella Maris School and just hearing the pile drivers all day putting the beams in for the vet. So then that to witness, having lived, not too far from there when it was built, and then having lived literally right down the street from where the vet was, it was a full circle moment. And so is this, to actually meet the man, the person that was responsible for the actual detonation. And one final question before I let you go is that when all is said and done, you are part now of the history of Veterans Stadium. Whether sure you are well aware of your part of the history of Veterans Stadium and the sports landscape of Philadelphia, but how does that make you feel when you actually sit back and realize that you're part of the legacy of the sports complex and the city of Philadelphia?
It's very cool. Veteran Stadium is unique in its history. I know that there were other stadiums that were of similar design, but I don't think there's another stadium in the world that has the backstory and the mystique and all of the things that go along with Veteran Stadium. Whether it's the 700 level experience, we'll call it, to the in-house jail cells and courtroom that were in the basement. A couple years back, it came out that there was somebody actually living in the vet for many years, and nobody knew about it, I think myself included. Um, so yeah, it's really amazing. I'm really excited about it. My father was a big Philly sports fan. Being there with him as a kid, and then standing there on the very last day, knowing that in 20 minutes from now, none of this is going to be here.
Mm-hmm.
It was really very cool, and it is nice to know that at least as long as anybody cares to look it up, they'll see that, oh yeah, that guy Nick Petros, he did it.
Nick Petros, the man who brought down Veterans Stadium. I want to thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure meeting you and catching up with you. And as I said, for me, a full circle moment to actually meet the man who was responsible for the demolition of Veterans Stadium. So, Nick, thanks so much, and for this part of Philadelphia sports history. And thank you so much for being on the program.
Well, thank you, Paul. I really appreciate you having me. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Until the next time, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for being with us on this edition of the Philly Factor. We'll catch you next time around.